Welcome to IAS Market Talk, your trusted source for timely ag market insights, brought to you by Innovative Ag Services. Each week, we break down the latest beef market trends impacting Northeast Iowa and Southwest Wisconsin, with expert updates tailored specifically for our IAS members. This week, you'll hear directly from Dave Reber, IAS Beef Production Specialist, who brings decades of experience and deep knowledge of the cattle industry to these conversations. Dave has been providing market updates to producers for years, and now he's bringing those insights straight to you through this podcast. Tune in weekly for what you need to know straight from people you know. With that, here's Dave Reber with the latest on what's happening in the cattle markets this week.
David Reber, Beef Production Specialist for Innovative Ag Services, calling with a beef market commentary for January 21st. We'll start with a recap of last week. We went into last Friday, hardly any cattle had traded, and the board was down hard because of some rumors about screwworms potentially being in the U.S., which didn't sound like after last Friday, none of that was substantiated. So basically a rumor kind of spooked the market. Feeder cattle were down like $8 on the board. Live cattle were down $3, $4, $5 on the board. So just kind of beat up the board. Well, then as a result of that, people sold cash cattle last Friday for steady money, kind of in that 232 to 233 range, which is kind of where the market's been for the last 3 weeks. Fast forward to this week, we got some things going in our favor. We got box beef finally kind of catching a little bit of a rally here, not as much as what you would think for this time of year, but box is back up to 366 roughly for choice. So we've put about $10 onto choice boxes. That choice select spread's widened out to $3.50 instead of being the same. So there's some things going that way. You have the official closing date of the Lexington, Nebraska Tyson plant. That happened this week, so that's done. But that's kind of been shaken out for the last couple of weeks. Some of those Nebraska cattle are finding their way over to Illinois to pack and plant there. They're going to get scattered around other places with that plant closing down. I think that was close to 5,000 heads. So they'll find a home somewhere. Unfortunately, some of them are going to end up in our market, which makes it where there's not as many negotiated cattle have to be bought every week. So part of the reason why we've seen a lot of steady money out of some of these major packers the last couple of weeks. And that's kind of my thoughts this week. Feels like kind of a flat market again, 232, 233. The wild card is probably what this weather does. Obviously, we know the weather is going to be harsh, but if the weather can give us a rally, my thoughts are if the weather is going to give us a rally, it's probably next week, because it's really not going to be horrible weather until Friday, Saturday. So to me, that feels like if it's going to throw some leverage our way, that happens next week on this deal. So keep an eye on that thing. And speaking of this harsh weather, wind chills, you get down 30, 40 below zero. Some of that common sense stuff, you got to make sure that water gets broke loose and we have access to water. Those heaters are working. That's a big thing. On these cattle that aren't in slats, you got to bed them up good. The good news is the manure is going to be dry because it's going to be frozen. But you just got to bed those cattle. You get those boulders, those big round chunks of frozen manure. You got to kind of work around them, but just don't spare any bedding on these cattle for the next 4 or 5 days. It's going to be kind of an ugly deal. A lot of guys will put a storm ration in for weather like this, especially when the wind's going to blow that hard. Wind is just really hard on intakes. So, a very simple answer to that is add an extra pound of hay per head per day and take out a pound of corn in that diet. That's a fairly safe, throw a little bit more roughage at those cattle when they're going through some major weather changes coming up here. So just a little something on that, and that note there. Feeder cattle, maybe a little bit softer, not a lot. These yearlings have held their value very well. 8-weight steers, 360-ish. That's been a market that's been very strong and will continue that way. There's just a lot of demand for 8-weight and 9-weight cattle. Some of these lighter weight cattle maybe softened a little bit. This is the time of year when I don't mind buying a little bit lighter animal. If they're into the end of January, I always kind of say the dead ones have died already. They're toughened up by now. So you don't get as nervous about buying lightweight cattle this time of year because they've adjusted to what's going on with this environment. So take care of stuff like you always do. It's one of those deals where sounds like we got 48 hours of hook coming at us. So just keep close eye on things. Fat market, steady to maybe a little bit stronger. The other thing is there's cattle on feed report Friday that's going to say low numbers. So we know it'll be bullish. The problem is most of that bullishness is probably going to be factored into the market before the report comes out. So just watch that thing 2 o'clock Friday, see where those placement numbers come in. But I think on-feed numbers are going to continue to be on the low side. Once again, my name is David Reber, Beef Production Specialist for Innovative Ag. Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of IAS Market Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss an update. And if you know a fellow producer who could benefit from this information, share this episode with them. For more updates and insights, visit innovativeag.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We'll catch you next time on IAS Market Talk.
Are you ready for a hands-on role with purpose? Join the facility operations team at Innovative Ag Services, where we value hard work, safety, and community. With locations across Northeast and Central Iowa and Southwest Wisconsin, we offer industry-leading benefits, on-the-job training, and a culture that supports your growth. From competitive pay to a uniform allowance, we invest in our team. Grow with IAS and discover your co-opportunity. Apply today at innovativeag.com.